Most people assume unfavorable musing equates to being sensible, that it's a serious evaluation of what could misfire, what might collapse, what's faulty. We convince ourselves we're merely getting ready for the direst outcome, that we're acting prudently, cleverly. However, the reality remains, the majority of our pessimistic notions aren't established on certainty. They're inclinations, duplicated blueprints, responses we've skilled without even understanding it. Observe, the mind is a superb narrator, and its favored listener exists as you. From an early phase, we begin captivating concepts regarding ourselves from what we perceive, what we undergo, and what we decipher. Notably, in instances of pressure, an unreached objective transforms into "I'm not adequate." An instant of quiet during a dialogue becomes "they consider I'm unintelligent." One letdown develops into "this invariably befalls me." And once those reflections are echoed sufficiently, they cease appearing like presumptions. They seem like certainties. Although they're not certainties, they're not impartial realities concerning who you exist. They're merely intellectual furrows you've eroded deeply by treading the identical route repeatedly. That's what an inclination embodies, and the greater amount you practice those reflections, "I'm insufficient, I'm proceeding to falter, I'll never comprehend this correctly," the extra acquainted they turn into. And the mind doesn't oppose familiarity, it desires it, because familiarity registers securely, it registers comfortably, despite when it's damaging. That's the great paradox of unfavorable musing. It registers like security, it feigns to safeguard us. If I anticipate frustration, I won't feel frustrated. If I censure myself initially, subsequently, nobody else's expressions can wound me. If I predict failure, subsequently, triumph turns into a reward, not an anticipation. And therefore, we vindicate it, we acclimatize it, we render it our standard, and eventually, it transforms into not merely a manner of musing, it evolves into a manner of existing. Although here's the predicament, when you regard every fleeting uncertainty as veracity, you bestow it authority. You commence constructing your persona encompassing it, and that exists as perilous. Envision a youthful instrumentalist consistently expressing to herself she's not gifted sufficiently. That reflection commenced somewhere, possibly a severe review, possibly an instant of contrast, although instead of contesting that reflection, she reiterates it. Eventually, she trusts it. She ceases rehearsing. She bypasses auditions. She prevents sharing her creation, not since she's not gifted, although since she trusts she's not. A conviction born not of actuality, although of reiteration. This embodies the manner existences diminish, not since individuals lack aptitude or prospect, although since they permit their inner account to diminish their vision. It's not the external realm that restricts them, it's the utterance in their intellect discreetly murmuring, "You can't," repeatedly, until it transforms into a soundtrack performing within the backdrop of everything they accomplish. And if you consider this exists merely concerning persons, reconsider. This inclination of negativity manifests in squads and corporations and cultures. When executives anticipate failure, when colleagues presume the direst, when organizations dread alteration, those aren't merely tactical verdicts, they're inclinations. Inclinations established in decades of reacting to blunders, with condemnation instead of understanding, with dread instead of inquisitiveness. And those inclinations, precisely like persons, eliminate expansion. Now, here's the optimistic intelligence. Inclinations can be shattered. Although it doesn't commence with coercion, it commences with awareness. The initial phase to eliminating your unfavorable musing exists to identify that it's merely that, musing, not prediction, not persona, not destiny, merely reflections. Reflections you can observe, interrupt, and substitute. This necessitates practice because the intellect doesn't relish relinquishing the acquainted. You might commence by merely observing when the account commences performing. This will never function. I'm not competent. Why even endeavor? Seize the reflection during the action. Bestow it a designation. Term it what it embodies, a recurrence, a blueprint, an inclination. And subsequently inquire the most significant query. Exists this factual, or exists this merely acquainted? That query alters everything because veracity encompasses substantiation. Veracity withstands examination. Although familiarity merely registers comfortably. It registers aged, eroded within, like an aged pair of footwear that don't sustain your feet anymore, although you retain dawning because they're effortless. To substitute an inclination, you necessitate a novel one, not merely optimistic musing. Intentional musing. Musing established in prospect, in vision, in conviction, not hallucination. It's not concerning feigning aspects are flawless, it's concerning electing to trust that advancement exists as conceivable, that you exist as adept, that setbacks exist as instructions, not labels, that your merit isn't demarcated by your direst days. I've perceived this metamorphosis firsthand in individuals, in squads, in executives. The alteration exists as delicate, although potent. It commences when somebody expresses, "What if I'm incorrect regarding myself?" That's not conceit, that's valor. The valor to concede that the tale you've been narrating yourself might not embody the entire tale. That possibly, merely possibly, there's additional to you than your uncertainties are eager to concede. And once that doorway unlatches, even a fracture, you commence to tread a novel route. One that doesn't refute dread, although doesn't defer to it either. One that identifies unfavorable musing for what it embodies, an inclination. And like any inclination, it forfeits its grasp the instant you cease feeding it. Therefore, if you're proceeding to echo anything, echo the veracity that you aren't your reflections. You exist as the thinker of your reflections, and that signifies you possess the authority to elect which ones acquire to linger. That's not motivation, that's not publicity, that's actuality. You don't necessitate to eliminate your unfavorable reflections with coercion. You eliminate them by famishing them, by declining to bestow them your conviction, your focus, your devotion, because conviction embodies fuel, and what you feed cultivates. Feed the reflections that assist you, famish the ones that don't. It genuinely embodies that uncomplicated, not effortless, although uncomplicated. And everything alters when you commence there. We relish to surmise we're logical beings, that our reflections exist as the consequence of cautious scrutiny, impartial logic, and coherent conclusions. Although additionally frequently than not, the intellect doesn't function established on logic. It functions established on blueprints. What you express to it frequently sufficiently, it commences to trust. Not since it's factual, not since it's demonstrated, although since it's acquainted. This embodies both the greatest carol and the greatest prospect you'll ever possess, because reiteration embodies the mechanism of conviction. Whether it's factual or bogus, uplifting or damaging, echoed reflections transform into approved reflections. And once a reflection exists as approved, it commences to contour the manner you perceive the realm, and additionally significantly, the manner you perceive yourself. Now, this embodies the reason a youngster expressed their not intelligence repeatedly commences to trust it even if they're brilliant. This embodies the reason somebody who consistently expresses to themselves they're unlucky commences to perceive misfortune everywhere. They're not cursed, they're not shattered, their intellect embodies merely accomplishing its task, filtering actuality through the prism it's been skilled to don. The intellect encompasses no moral orientation. It doesn't inspect your reflections for precision or impartiality, it inspects for frequency. Contemplate something sufficient instances, and it transforms into the prism through which everything else exists as deciphered. This embodies the manner biases are shaped, not merely societal or cultural ones, personal ones. Biases against our own aptitude, biases against our own capabilities. And we don't even understand it's transpiring because it registers so normally. Allow me to articulate it merely. The intellect embodies like a garden, and reiteration embodies the water. Water, a reflection daily, whether it's a weed or a blossom, and it will cultivate. And once it cultivates, it propagates. One unfavorable conviction doesn't linger secluded. It creeps into other domains. I'm deficient at public speaking transforms into I'm deficient with individuals. Although it doesn't cease there, because convictions propel conduct. What you trust contours what you attempt, what you pursue, what you dare to endeavor. If your intellect has been rehearsing failure for decades, even the minimal challenge transforms into intimidating. The intellect expresses, "Why endeavor?" You understand how this concludes. And if you heed to that utterance lengthy sufficiently, you cease endeavoring altogether. Not since you can't prosper, although since you've rehearsed failure so frequently that it registers unavoidable. That's the frightening component. Although here's the liberating veracity. Reiteration functions both manners. You can employ the identical mechanism, the identical intellectual circuitry to construct conviction instead of shattering it, to fortify valor instead of dread, to cultivate resilience instead of insecurity. Although it necessitates intentionality, because optimistic reiteration doesn't transpire accidentally. Unfavorable reflections are frequently triggered by dread, pressure, or aged injuries. They sneak within. Although empowering reflections, those you must elect. You must articulate them, inscribe them, practice them. This isn't concerning fluffy endorsements or vacant motivation. This embodies neuroplasticity, the science-backed actuality that your intellect exists as invariably understanding, invariably rewiring itself. And when you consistently echo reflections of capability, expansion, or intention, your intellect commences constructing novel connections. It commences reinforcing novel pathways. And eventually, those reflections begin to register naturally, even automatic. This embodies the reason the most potent aspect you can accomplish isn't to eliminate all unfavorable musing. That's unachievable. The objective embodies to dilute it with improved input, to surpass it, to surround yourself with reiteration that reinforces what you desire to trust. Not since you're delusional, although since you're designing your intellectual atmosphere with intention. Contemplate an athlete prior to a competition. They don't express, "I anticipate I don't blunder." They envision triumph. They articulate conviction. They echo mantras, routines, even gestures that trigger focus and assurance. Why? Because they comprehend that performance commences within the intellect. And if the intellect exists as skill to anticipate failure, the physique will frequently pursue. Although if the intellect exists as skill to anticipate strength, valor, and lucidity, the physique ascends to complement it. The identical principle pertains in everyday existence. If you consistently express, "I'm deficient with individuals," you'll conduct in manners that reinforce that conviction. You'll prevent eye contact, you'll restrain during dialogues. And subsequently, when individuals respond with aloofness, you'll express, "Observe, I existed as accurate." Although that's not verification, that's self-fulfilling prediction. You weren't perceiving actuality. You existed as recreating it established on what your intellect had rehearsed. Now envision flipping the account. Envision expressing, "I'm understanding to connect improved with individuals." It's not a falsehood. It's a direction, a directing declaration. And the additional you reiterate it, the additional you'll commence to observe prospects to cultivate within that domain. You'll seize yourself existing merely a little more receptive, a little more present, a little more assured. And those instances construct. Reiteration conducts to conviction, conviction conducts to conduct, and conduct creates novel outcomes. This exists not concerning perfection. You'll still possess uncertainties. You'll still possess instances where aged reflections sneak back within. Although the distinction embodies you'll understand what to accomplish with them. You'll identify that they're not veracity, they're echoes, aged tracks still performing on a recurrence. And you'll possess the instruments to alter the track. That's the genuine authority. Not in silencing every unfavorable reflection, although in declining to amplify it. In electing day following day to articulate conviction louder than uncertainty, to practice the mindset that sustains the existence you desire to construct. Because here's the bottom line, your intellect trusts what you reiterate. Therefore, ensure you're reiterating something worth trusting. And if you've expended decades rehearsing the incorrect account, that's acceptable. Commence inscribing a novel one sentence at a time, one verdict at a time, one conviction at a time. It's not concerning existing flawless, it's concerning existing intentional. You are training your intellect whether you realize it or not. The soul query embodies what are you training it to trust. Render that response count. Unfavorable musing exists as seductive. It arrives dressed as logic, cloaked in circumspection, feigning to embody beneficial. And on the facade, it even resonates accountable. It expresses, don't endeavor that, you might falter. It murmurs, be cautious, don't elevate your expectations. It expresses to you, linger where it's secure, don't jeopardize what you previously possess. And because those utterances resonate protective, we trust them. We consider they're retaining us grounded, although what they're genuinely accomplishing exists retaining us stagnant. Observe, unfavorable musing frequently isn't concerning certainties or probability. It's concerning dread. Dread of failure, dread of humiliation, dread of forfeiture. And rather than confront that dread straightforwardly, the intellect dresses it up in rationality. We term it existing practical. We express we're merely existing realistic. Although additionally, frequently than not, it's merely dread in disguise. It's significant to comprehend this because dread encompasses a task to accomplish, and it's very proficient at that task. Dread exists to retain us alive, to safeguard us from menaces. And in a realm of predators and peril, dread retained our predecessors from wandering excessively distant or rendering foolish hazards. Although the menaces we confront today aren't saber-toothed tigers, they're rejection, judgment, uncertainty, emotional hazards, not physical ones. And yet, our intellects haven't completely evolved to articulate the distinction. Dread still rings the alarm bells loudly and distinctly. Therefore, what transpires every instant you contemplate accomplishing something audacious, distinct, or unfamiliar, commencing a novel undertaking, articulating during a gathering, launching that concept you've possessed within your intellect for decades, dread tugs the emergency brake. It conveys a signal, peril ahead. And unfavorable musing activates to sustain the dread. What if you falter? What if individuals chuckle? What if you forfeit everything? And here's the twist. Dread isn't deceiving you. It's merely not narrating the entire veracity. Indeed, you could falter. Indeed, you might acquire censured. Indeed, you might feel uneasy. Although none of that exists as terminal, none of it delineates you. Dread doesn't understand how to weigh context. It solely understands how to scream, halt. And if we heed to it without query, we transform into prisoners within our own intellects, mistaking self-protection for astuteness. There's a deeper predicament here. The additional we heed to that utterance, the quieter our other utterance transforms into. The one that expresses endeavor, the one that expresses cultivate, the one that fantasizes. 'Cause render no mistake, every instance you obey dread-based musing, you reinforce it. You instruct your intellect, this embodies the secure route, let's linger here. And like a well-eroded trail within a forest, that intellectual pathway transforms into simpler to tread, additional automatic, harder to shatter. This embodies the manner individuals transform into ensnared, not by their circumstances, although by their mindset. An individual with all the assets within the realm, although a dread-based mindset, can reside a very minimal existence. Meanwhile, somebody with almost nothing, although the valor to contest their dread, can construct something extraordinary. Because dread isn't the barrier, our conviction in it embodies. You've perceived it in others. The colleague who invariably encompasses great concepts, although never articulates. The companion who fantasizes of commencing a commerce, although lingers within a vocation they detest. The student who's brilliant, although never applies themselves because they're apprehensive of not existing adequate. Within each of these narratives, dread embodies its task, endeavoring to safeguard, although it's accomplishing it excessively proficiently. It's safeguarding them not merely from detriment, although from expansion, from alteration, from existence. Although what if we commenced to perceive dread differently? What if we ceased regarding it like a red illumination and commenced regarding it like a signal, a sign that we're on the periphery of something that matters? Because here's what exists as accurate. Dread invariably manifests where there's aptitude. It doesn't squander its energy on aspects that don't matter. Dread manifests when the stakes are genuine, and that's not a justification to retreat. it's a justification to heed. Therefore, the most audacious individuals aren't fearless. They merely don't permit dread to reside within the driver's seat. They perceive it, they acknowledge it, although they don't obey it, because they understand that the expense of heeding to dread exists as higher than the hazard of behaving despite of it. The expense embodies your aptitude, your delight, your sense of intention. This isn't merely concerning personal expansion, it's concerning leadership too. Executives who permit dread to propel verdicts frequently conclude up creating cultures of hesitation, squads that are apprehensive to articulate, organizations that prevent innovation. Because when executives function from dread of forfeiting authority, dread of faltering publicly, dread of rendering the incorrect judgment, they commence managing to not forfeit, instead of managing to triumph. Although leadership isn't concerning preventing hazard, it's concerning navigating it with lucidity and valor. It's concerning existing the kind of individual who can feel dread and still advance. The kind of individual who identifies unfavorable musing not as a warning, although as a mirror reflecting the components of us that are frightened, uncertain, or susceptible, and electing to behave anyway. That election exists where everything alters, because when you cease bestowing dread the concluding say, you commence to reclaim your agency. You cease perceiving unfavorable reflections as commands and commence regarding them as data beneficial for scrutiny, although not for decision rendering. You can perceive the utterance that expresses, "What if it doesn't function?" and respond, "Indeed, although, what if it does?" And when you respond like that sufficiently instances, something potent transpires. The intellect commences to recalibrate. It commences to associate dread not merely with peril, although with prospect, not merely with menace, although with transformation. And the inclination of unfavorable musing begins to unravel, not because you battled it with coercion, although because you ceased trusting its disguise. Therefore, the subsequent instance that utterance pops up, the one that expresses "you're not prepared," or "you're not adequate," or "it's not the accurate moment," pause and inquire. Embodies this dread articulating and embodies it safeguarding me from detriment or from expansion. Because protection and paralysis frequently register the identical within the instant, although solely one propels you forward. The objective isn't to eliminate dread, it's to cease bestowing it authority over your elections. Because on the other facet of dread exists not merely liberty, it's your destiny, and that's worth contending for. Unfavorable musing doesn't resemble avoidance, it doesn't resemble concealing, it doesn't wave its hands and scream, "I'm distracting you." It's much additional than that. It registers like scrutiny, it registers like preparation, it registers like you're existing clever, although frequently what it genuinely embodies is avoidance and disguise. And what it distracts you from, what it shields you from, is your own accountability. Observe, when we descend into unfavorable thought blueprints, "This will never function," "I'm not adequate," "They probably won't relish it," we express ourselves we're merely existing realistic, although realism isn't the issue. The genuine issue embodies that those reflections frequently discharge us off the hook. They alleviate us of the compression to behave, to endeavor, to possess the outcome. Because if failure exists as unavoidable, why assume accountability? If you're persuaded something won't function, why trouble endeavoring to it? Unfavorable musing transforms into a defense, a wall. It safeguards the ego from the sting of endeavoring and declining brief. It retains you from possessing to jeopardize your persona, your pride, your assurance. And therefore, we employ it sometimes even unconsciously as a tool to evade accountability. Not because we're idle or inept, although because accountability exists as uneasy. It demands endeavor, vulnerability. And indeed, although the trade-off embodies enormous, because when you hand your authority to unfavorable musing, you're not merely evading ache, you're evading prospect. You're stepping out of the recreation before it even commences. You're distracting yourself from what could embody accomplished, could embody altered, could embody cultivated if solely you existed as eager to carry the weight of endeavoring. This transpires in minimal, ordinary manners. An individual doesn't apply for the vocation they desire because they're not qualified enough, although they haven't genuinely inquired, they haven't reached out, they haven't endeavored to bridge the disparity. They've merely presumed rejection and permit that presumption vindicate in action. Or an executive perceives their squad disengaged, and instead of inquiring arduous questions concerning culture, communication, vision, they chalk it up to individuals. These days, unfavorable musings transforms into a scapegoat, a manner to evade accountability for influence. This mindset embodies not merely personal, it's systemic. It spreads like conflagration in squads and organizations. When squads repeatedly express "that won't function here," or "we've endeavored that previously," or individuals won't opt for it, what they're genuinely accomplishing exists electing comfort over accountability. Because if you previously trust something embodies doomed, you don't possess to possess the endeavor of altering it. You don't possess to accomplish the arduous task of existing accountable for outcome. You acquire to feel clever and secure at the identical moment. Although here's the predicament. Leadership, genuine leadership, necessitates accountability, not merely for outcomes, although for the energy you convey into the area, for the reflections you articulate audibly, for the tale you narrate your squad. Every instance you default to unfavorable musing, you're not merely commenting on actuality, you're contouring it. You're creating a narrative that either mobilizes individuals or paralyzes them, and that's a choice accountability. The identical pertains to your personal expansion. If you consistently contemplate, "I'll never embody proficient at this," that transforms into a self-fulfilling prediction, not because it's factual, although because you've elected to trust it instead of assuming accountability for enhancing. You've employed unfavorable musing to safeguard yourself from the encumbrance of manifesting every day and accomplishing the task, the genuine task, of practicing, understanding, faltering, adjusting. That task embodies weighty, it demands ownership, and unfavorable musing permits you to set it down. Although here's what individuals overlook. Assuming accountability doesn't signify condemning yourself when aspects proceed awry. It doesn't signify disgrace, it signifies accountability, the aptitude to respond, the authority to render a distinct election, to behave when confronted with uncertainty, to influence your scenario, even when the probabilities are vague. That's what unfavorable musing pilfers from you, eliminates your sense of agency, and it bestows you back a tale, a comforting, acquainted, self-limiting tale that expresses, "This embodies merely how it embodies." Although it's not how it embodies, it's merely how it registers. And feelings aren't invariably certainties. They exist as signals. And when unfavorable reflections manifest, they are frequently pointing to a deeper veracity, that there's something we're apprehensive to possess, some outcome we don't desire to be accountable for, some failure we don't desire to confront. Although here's the paradox, the instant you cease distracting yourself with all the justifications something might not function, and genuinely assume accountability for rendering it function, something potent transpires. You shift from a passive observer to an active participant. You cease inquiring, "What if I falter?" and commence inquiring, "What can I accomplish to escalate the prospect of triumph?" You cease predicting doom and commence creating strategy, and strategy invariably surpasses speculation. Accountability exists where alteration commences, invariably, and not merely when aspects are proceeding swimmingly. The accurate test embodies when the probabilities are stacked, when the dreads are loud, when the pathway embodies vague. That's when unfavorable musing arrives knocking, and that's when your accountability transforms into your anchor. Not to embody certain, not to embody flawless, although to engage with lucidity, with endeavor, and with ownership. And that kind of mindset alters everything, because once you elect to assume accountability, unfavorable musing forfeits its grasp. It transforms into background sound, not the director of the play. It's still there. Certainly, it invariably will embody, although it no longer acquires to run the spectacle. You accomplish, because here's the veracity. You are accountable for the tale you reiterate. You are accountable for the reflections you feed. You are accountable for the elections you render, even when dread desires to render them for you. That accountability is not an encumbrance, it's your authority. And when you embrace it, when you possess it completely, consistently, courageously, you don't merely silence negativity. You outgrow it, because you've ceased bestowing it your duration, your energy, and your conviction. And that's when genuine advancement commences. There's an instant that transpires in all of us. It doesn't arrive with fireworks, it doesn't arrive with some dramatic turning point. It's tranquil, it's subtle, and that's what renders it so perilous. It's the instant when your valor expires. Not all at once, although in fragments. And what eliminates it isn't failure, it isn't criticism, it isn't rejection. It's unfavorable musing. Persistent, internal, convincing negativity that murmurs so frequently and so convincingly that you commence to trust it. That's how valor expires, one reflection at a time. Valor isn't something you're born with, it's something you construct. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, it must embody, employed, examined. And yet, the majority of individuals permit theirs to atrophy, not because they're feeble, although because they feed their dread additional than their destiny. They practice uncertainty additional than conviction. They rehearse direst case scenarios additional than best case outcomes. And eventually, without even observing, their inner realm transforms into a location where valor can't survive. That's the expense of unfavorable musing. It doesn't merely distort your perception, it rewires your association with hazard, with endeavor, with hope. It instructs you to diminish, to second guesses, to hesitate. It trains you to sit back when you should lean within. And once you've rehearsed that lengthy sufficiently, it commences to register like astuteness, like maturity, like realism. Although it's not, it's dread. And dread, if left unchecked, will invariably request you to linger minimal. Here's what renders it harder. Unfavorable musing doesn't announce itself as the adversary. It manifests with a clipboard and a checklist. It resembles planning. It resonates like, let's merely embody cautious, or what if it all proceeds awry? And indeed, planning and prudence encompass their location, although when those queries dominate every election, when they transform into the loudest utterance within the area, they're no longer assisting you. They're safeguarding your comfort at the expenditure of your valor. Comfort registers swimmingly, we all yearn it, although nothing meaningful transpires there. Every great concept, every leap forward, every act of leadership or creativity or expansion, it commenced with somebody electing valor over comfort. Somebody who perceived the uncertainties, felt the dread, confronted the uncertainty, and still advanced. They didn't await for the uncertainties to vanish, they behaved anyway. That's the veracity. The majority of individuals overlook valor isn't the absence of unfavorable reflections, it's the refusal to embody governed by them. Because valor expires when you retain feeding the conviction that you're not adequate, that your concepts don't matter, that you'll never render it. And those convictions, they don't commence from failure. They commence from reiteration, from permitting unfavorable musing to articulate every day without being contested. That's the sluggish toxin. You don't observe it initially, although eventually it corrodes your initiative, your willingness to endeavor, your conviction in your own aptitude to render a distinction. And it doesn't merely impact you, it spreads, because valor embodies contagious, although so embodies dread. When an executive functions from negativity, their squad begins to accomplish the identical. When a parent models hesitation and self-doubt, their offspring absorb that language. And when a companion continually articulates the language of defeat, the individuals encompassing them begin to lower their own expectations too. You don't merely eliminate your own valor, you quietly, subtly eliminate the valor of the individuals encompassing you. Now envision the opposite. Envision what transpires when you determine to eliminate unfavorable musing instead. Not refute it, not feign it doesn't exist, although identify it for what it embodies and elect not to feed it. Envision substituting "I could falter" with "I might understand something." Envision swapping "I'm not prepared" with "I'm eager to cultivate into this." That simple shift doesn't erase dread, although it does silence its dominance. It creates area for valor to respire again. This embodies what genuine transformation resembles. It's not boisterous, it's not flamboyant. It's the tranquil daily verdict to elect thought blueprints that sustain valor rather than demolish it. It's catching the self-sabotage in genuine duration. It's observing the age tape performing within your intellect and determining to alter the station. It's substituting the recurrence of why me with why not me. And eventually, those verdicts accumulate. You recondition your mindset. They fortify the neural pathways of resilience, of optimism, of hope.
And that's not fluff, that's neuroscience. Your intellect literally rewires established on what you practice. Therefore, if you've been practicing dread, your intellect will transform into very efficient at dread. Although if you commence practicing valor, even in minimal imperfect manners, it will begin to alter sluggishly, consistently. Lovely. Here's the most liberating component. You don't possess to feel courageous to behave courageously. You merely possess to determine. Valor isn't an emotion, it's a commitment. It's the verdict to manifest despite of the emotion. And the additional you render that verdict, the additional it transforms into who you exist, not merely something you accomplish once in a while. There will invariably embody justifications not to. The unfavorable reflections will never completely vanish. They'll manifest in novel forms, in novel seasons, with novel disguises. Although they solely encompass authority when you bestow them your focus, your conviction, your reiteration. The instant you cease feeding them, they diminish, they forfeit impetus, and within that area, valor returns. Therefore, indeed, eliminate your unfavorable musing, not because it's incorrect 100% of the duration, although because it's a terrible master. Because if you bestow it the wheel, it will propel your existence into smallness, into stagnation, into remorse. And the realm doesn't necessitate additional individuals playing minimal. It necessitates individuals eager to embody audacious, to assume the hazard, to stand up, to articulate, to endeavor. Valor embodies what constructs commerce. It embodies what repairs associations. It embodies what propels alteration in squads, families, communities. Although solely if it's alive, solely if it's existing fed additional than dread. You previously encompass it within you. You invariably did. You merely possess to safeguard it, guard it, nurture it. And the initial phase in accomplishing that embodies simple. Cease rehearsing the reflections that eliminate it. Eliminate your unfavorable musing before it eliminates your valor, because your valor